Hi everyone, welcome to this week's weekly notice with Andy No. I appreciate your patience as I'm not in my normal setting. I'm on the move right now, so um, background looks a bit different, camera is different. I don't have my normal setup, but you show up here for the content, what I have to say, and not so much the how things look on screen, which even at its best, we must admit, is still very plain. Um, as always, please leave questions and comments throughout the podcast. I do try to keep track of it, and we'll get to the questions and comments at the towards the end of the show. Okay, so it's June, which means it's Pride Month. If you're in any urban area in any Western country, you've probably have been forced to notice. Let's just say that. I'm traveling through parts of the East Coast right now, and the displays of pride are up everywhere, which is normal. I'm used to that. I'm from Portland, mind you, and I've only lived in liberal cities my entire life. Um, But this year was the first time that I noticed the really mass adoption of the new Pride event, which is different than the normal rainbow flag. Now there are new colors on it, um, like lavender and pink and white, and also black and brown. And these new colors, which are in it's like in an arrow shape. So it takes up basically half the flag, takes away from half of the rainbow, and it's meant to symbolize trans and black and brown people. Um, for me as a gay person, I think um, a few years ago when I saw that pride flags began adopting the putting on black and brown, at that time they on the normal rainbow flag, they just put the black and brown at the bottom. I found it quite an eyesore because the rainbow flag as a rainbow represents all of the colors of the spectrum of the world, right? About tolerance and diversity, and that's as diverse as it can be. And then to put on colors that represent human skin tones, um, that goes against the message of the flag, or rather, there's no consistency in the rationality. And then now that they're adding additional, pastel colors to represent trans people, um, it it's taking what's already a nobody has issues with gay pride, but some people have issues with BLM and issues with radical trans ideology. If you have read my reporting and listened to my commentary before, you probably know that that's more of the perspective I have. I find BLM and radical trans ideology very destructive political ideologies that are very radical and extreme and are anti-American and anti-liberal democracy. They make a certain number of claims that are demonstrably untrue, and evidence doesn't matter to them. And if you don't subject to their demands, then you are deemed a fascist or racist, worthy of violence and worthy of being killed. Your life becomes worthless if you disagree with them. I can speak firsthand as someone who has been subjected to violence by people who say they defend sexual minorities such as myself and people of color such as myself. Um, they view you as scum and somebody who should be killed if you disagree with them. So I look at the new pride flag today, if you want to call it the pride flag. I think there's another name for it, whatever. Um, with, I guess you could say with disgust. Um, and the fact that it's been adopted at the corporate level um, means that it's not subversive at all. It's not countercultural. It's not cool. And I mean, when you have United, when you have Google, when you have Apple, when you have Delta, when you have McDonald's, on your side with these symbols, and you have Adidas and Nikes on your side, you're not, yeah, that's not countercultural. So stop thinking you're being edgy or punk with these symbols. Um, I was on Tim Pool's show in person last week. Please check it out if you haven't seen it yet. And I discuss a little bit about this topic. I don't normally talk about gay or LGBTQIA2S plus issues. I just said a very long acronym. And again, that's another thing too. Wasn't enough to just say gay pride or LGBT pride. You have to add on many of these other letters that um, some of them are kind of like really a political ideology, um, in my opinion. And so we discussed this a little bit on Tim Pool's show. It was last Friday, and I'm going to show a clip of me from the show discussing. Um, there's a food delivery service that put out a whole campaign on Twitter. It's a stop motion commercial that has fruits. It's meant to advertise what they say is a bottom friendly menu. Bottom friendly for those who are maybe wholesome or not aware of the lingo. That's referring to foods that I'm trying to think. Okay, I'll just avoid euphemisms. So the uh, campaign is about promoting certain food menus where your digestive tract is cleared in a way that so when you engage in anal sex that there's no um, stuff down there. Um, and so that's what this campaign is about on Twitter. And they're using stop motion animation that looks actually quite cutesy and child friendly. And the fruit is decorated in, it's wearing like leather gear and a jock strap and all that. And I discussed this a little bit on Tim Pool's show, and I wanted to air it with you all.
Can I
Yeah,
share my thoughts? I find this offensive not because of traditional or religious values, but the fact that once upon a time, much of the effort that helped really to mainstream and normalize tolerance for gay and lesbian people was the fact of showing that we are just like you. And now these advertisement campaigns in recent years and political campaigns and social campaigns during Pride are about focusing on like sex and explicitly sex. And that was what originally made a lot of people uncomfortable around gay or lesbian people. They always thought about the sex and the fetish and all that. And then the fact, that this particular advertising campaign is focusing on anal sex and using references to fetish gear to talk about what's that have to do
food
with
delivery.
pride.
Yeah.
No, food
delivery.
Exactly.
So someone responded to their tweet and they said, if you are not literally helping us have sex, are you really an ally? And Postmate said, exactly. And that's blah, blah, blah. And they're like, that's.
Yeah, so a lot of my conservative supporters would disagree with me on this area, but I think uh, part of universal human rights means that there needs to be written into the law protections for people who are lesbian and gay and bisexual. And I think in the past, a lot of people who took issues with what they viewed as a gay lifestyle was the fact that it was very hard for them to separate gay or lesbian identity from sex, which they found very uncomfortable. And actually, I don't judge people for having religious disagreements over this issue anymore. I used to a lot. I used to view it as strictly a bigoted view, and as I've become older, developed a more nuanced view on it. A lot of people have, if they're following a faith tradition of, let's say, an Abrahamic faith tradition, where things are laid out very clearly on what is acceptable, what are the acceptable boundaries for sex and family. I can understand that, and I can have respect for the fact that they have different views. And I think part of why gay marriage was, I think, important, the push for that, is that it helped demonstrate to the public that you can be, that by we, I'm referring to people who are lesbian and gay or bi, that we really aren't any different from you, that we aren't these degenerate freaks that you may have heard from, I don't know, hate preachers or fear mongers. And marriage was something that we wanted to be able to access as a civil right, because we have families as well, and we, the statement "love is love," I think, used to be powerful, and now how it's used today is it's just used as a banal statement to represent all types of really degenerate activities. So we're seeing a lot of this content from pride shows now, because cameras are everywhere, and you're seeing that pride is not about a rally or march showing the visibility of gay people who exist in all strata of society, but rather it's about how can we be very shocking about our sexual lifestyle. And by that, I'm referring to those who will be nude, engage in sexual activity on the street, engaging in fetish acts, etc. And this stuff has actually been around as part of Pride for a very long time. It's not really new. A lot of people are seeing the videos now. I think what is new, though, is an attempt to really make these adult events like so-called family-friendly events when they're not family-friendly. And there was a slippery slope when there was a push to introduce children to forms of drag shows. It started with the library reading stuff, drag queen story hours, and now it's moved to actually events where bars in some places will host like a drag show for children, and it's completely inappropriate. And I find it really disappointing that not more gay and lesbian people are speaking up. It should be quite clear that these type of entertainment activities are not appropriate for children. The jokes are not appropriate, the costumes, the dancing. I mean, the reason why they take place in gay clubs and gay bars on stage, and where you hand them money like the strippers, it's because all of it is a type of adult entertainment. So I'm going to show some video that you may have seen have gone viral from some Pride events. One moment. And for those who have joined in late, please leave your questions and comments throughout this live stream. Okay. So this was last weekend in Washington, D.C., the D.C. Pride event. And just watch the video first, and then I'll give a bit more context. So that's a transsexual person who's showing off the nipples and the breasts, and you see the kids there. That person was dancing in front of a pro-European Union group at the DC Pride. Um, I mean, I don't know what parents are thinking taking their kids to that. Like, yeah, I'm glad that more people are seeing these type of acts and seeing that there are some people who think this is appropriate to mean their children, and it's good that there's actually an outrage. Um, I think one of the failings of the LGBTQ community is that we haven't been more vocal about protecting children's innocence. And in fact, the rush towards the embracing of what they say is a sex positive culture or society, I think has come to the detriment of children because this stuff um, is saturated into mainstream society. It's been going on for a long time. But I mean, if you think back to, let's say, I'm thinking back to my childhood, what caused outrage back then was Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera wearing very provocative, revealing outfits in their music videos or performances. That was what caused outrage then. Speaking of Christina Aguilera, I'm not going to show this clip because I know, it may be too graphic. I already showed several graphic things, and I apologize if anybody is offended. But Weekly Notice is it's a show about news, and news is it's not family friendly most of the time. I'm sorry. So Christina Aguilera was one of the performers at LA Pride last weekend, and she went on stage with a strap-on penis and testicles prop, and one of the other singers on stage masturbated this penis prop that Christina was wearing. So, and that LA Pride, by the way, that was is advertised as a family-friendly event, and all ages were welcome. In fact, yeah, you needed a ticket if you were 5 and above, I believe. So they had young people in the audience. That video that I just played, by the way, of the transsexual person who was twerking in DC, that was recorded by Savannah Hernandez. And I just want to give a moment to talk a bit about Savannah. This is her Instagram. So she's been banned from Twitter for unknown reasons. And yeah, so I just please follow Savannah on Instagram, and then from there you'll see she has other social media accounts. There's a video where she's talking about how her independent um, journalist work has been censored by Twitter, and that's wrong, by the way. She does amazing work. Please follow her. I've been trying my best to advocate for Twitter's support to re-examine the reasons why she was permanently banned. She's over and over has captured since going back years now, like videos of protests and riots that viral because she's a really good on the ground videographer, and I can't overstate how hard that work really is. I used to do it, and I was subjected to a lot of violence for it, subjected to tear gas, subjected to assault. And so when videographers go out and do that, they deserve a platform for it, right? So, and they deserve a thank you. So please follow Savannah. Okay. All right, that is my gay pride tirade, if you will. If I don't know if I have any gay or lesbian supporters or maybe even detractors who are watching right now, please leave some questions and comments. What do you think? Maybe you disagree with me. I certainly don't say I'm a spokesperson for gay people. I hate it when self-described leaders of the gay community give interviews and go on television and talk about what they want, what they're offended by. Like, they should speak for themselves. Unfortunately, they're represented by these large institutions, and all of the gay rights groups have been captured by CRT and radical leftist ideology. Speaking of which, by the way, there's a case out of Ireland that is so emblematic of this. I'm going to pull up the story before I move on from this. Um, okay. So, Dublin Pride, this is a headline from the Post Millennial, cuts ties with national broadcaster after debates on erasure, women in language and law. So, RTE is the national broadcaster of Ireland. It's similar to the BBC or the CBC in Canada, and they have a media partnership with Dublin Pride, Dublin having the largest gay pride event in Ireland. And Dublin Pride announced in this long statement that they have immediately ended their relationship, all because RTE, which is a very large broadcasting corporation, on one radio program hosted a discussion. It wasn't even really a debate, but it's a discussion about should the word woman and mother be removed from legislation on maternity in Ireland. And there are some women's rights activists who strongly disagree with the removal of that language. They feel that it's stripping women away from legislation and erasing them from like how we speak. And you see that a lot. You see that in the healthcare system most clearly. All this move towards what they say is inclusivity, but I disagree with that. I think it is a erasure, and I wish that more gay men would speak up about it. A lot of us don't really do it because it doesn't affect us. But I view this as a human rights issue. Language is really important. That's why it's really important in legislation for the language to be clear. And when you erase women, literally, the word, or mother, and use these terms that sort of essentialize womanhood to not exist anymore, you then just talk about women in euphemism and body parts. I think it's actually very dehumanizing, and so I think that's a completely fair debate to be having, particularly when it's moderated and on radio program like RTE is center left. But Dublin Pride just couldn't take it, and they released a statement, about their tantrum, essentially. And that's so emblematic of where the institutional LGBT community is. They're intolerant, they're authoritarian, they're draconian, and goodness, let's hope they never gain power, that type of ideology that they have doesn't gain power, because in the name of diversity and inclusion, they will bulldoze over freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And it really pains me to see that in Western liberal democracies, that these type of groups are representing what they say are people like me. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Did anybody hear about a group named Patriot Front this past week? You probably did. It was all across the national news and international news, actually. So last Saturday in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, there was which is in northern Idaho, there was a pride event, and it was controversial because there were drag queens involved, and it was advertised as a family-friendly event for children. And so some conservatives went to protest. A number of groups went to protest. Patriot Front was one of the groups that showed up there. Patriot Front is described as a far-right neo-Nazi group. From what I understand, they are explicitly a white nationalist group. They are known for their marches and rallies, which they've done usually where dozens of men who are covered wearing the same outfit and covering their faces will march with US flags. They've done a number of events in DC. So they were one of the groups that were protesting this Pride event. Antifa went there as well. I think Antifa went there believing that they would be protectors or security for this Pride event. So you had a small group that crossed state lines from Portland, Oregon to go to Idaho to attend this. And so the media was all over the arrests of the Patriot Front members. You've probably seen the videos and the photos where the men are on the grass, detained by police with their hands up. That was viewed like 2 million, millions of times on Twitter. And the 31 members or affiliates of Patriot Front are accused of conspiracy to riot. That's a law or a crime in Idaho. I don't know if other states have that. It's not surprising to me that it hasn't been used. Like similar laws haven't been used to shut down gatherings by Antifa or the far left where they explicitly call for violence on the flyers or whatever. So at this point, the public were not privy to what intelligence the law enforcement may have had. So I don't know if they have evidence that Patriot Front was actually going to riot. Patriot Front are not known for riots. They're known for doing these large marches that don't involve any violence at all. And but where there was violence was the arrest of one Antifa member, and I was, I think, the first and the only to report on it. So this is from my locals. If you want to support my independent journalism, you can go to ngo.locals.com. You'll see essentially like a blog place, but people can comment, and then I interact in the comments and all that. So one Antifa member who was arrested for alleged violence was Robert John Stones. This is Robert John Stones. This is an Antifa member from Portland who I've tracked before. It uses the moniker fake name switch. All of the Antifa members in Portland use fake names. It's because they are a criminal enterprise and they use fake names so to protect their identities. You may have noticed just now that I referred to John Robert Stones as it. That is one of this individual's pronouns. I believe Robert may use other pronouns, but I'll just stick with it to keep it simple, and it is one of its preferred pronouns anyways. So this person, which, by the way, the law enforcement in Idaho, when they did the press release and gave all the information about the Patriot Front members, they didn't give the information about this person. I had to go digging on my own and follow up with their press office to get the name. And that's wrong, by the way. It's the role of if they're going to do a presser, they're going to talk about the arrests of the day related to that Pride event. They need to talk about all the arrests, not just the ones that are going to get them favorable coverage, okay? this is from the sheriff's office. So Robert John Storms was accused of actual, by the way, fighting. It was also accused of various drug crimes, possession of controlled substance, and drug paraphernalia. Antifa raised bail for this person on Twitter, of course. These are some other photos of Robert John Storms, who identifies as trans. This is from an Antifa account in Portland. We will be updating best we can about on the ground Coeur d'Alene today. So a lot of them weren't able to go from Portland all the way to northern Idaho. It's quite a long trip. But they were updating their comrades on Twitter about it. And here they announced one comrade had been arrested, referring to Robert John Storms, which they tried to hide. Alyssa Azar, who's an Antifa member from Portland, who currently has a pending felony case for violence related to a riot. She crossed state lines to go cover the activities at that Pride event, and she appears to have lied about what happened involving the arrest of her comrade, John Robert Storms. She wrote, "Fascists were just harassing a trans woman. The cops arrested her and left the fascists alone." Okay, yeah, I don't believe her. Yeah, she's been on camera being a very violent person. So, yeah, this is the case that you wouldn't have heard about in the local, national, international press. But remember that face. And remember these people. Robert John Storms uses a moniker, as I said a moment ago, and calls for really extreme violence on its social media, which has been deactivated because it doesn't want you to see what it actually says and believes in its links to Antifa in Portland. In other Antifa news, so in Philadelphia, there's a new update now to a case that happened in 2018. So nearly 4 years after the attack. So back in 2018 in Philadelphia, these three Antifa members had brutally jumped and beat two Hispanic men, two actually Marines. They blinded them with pepper spray and then assaulted them. And they were accusing them of being white supremacists and Proud Boy members, which they were not. The three Antifa members, Joseph Alkoff, Thomas Keenan, and Thomas Massey. Philadelphia is the East Coast stronghold of Antifa. They do a lot of violent organizing there. They have meeting spots and bookstores that they are a part of. I read about this in my book. I actually read about this case in my book, although during my book, the criminal trial and court hearings are still on. So the update, and this is in Philadelphia under District Attorney Larry Krasner. Krasner benefited in his election campaign from George Soros' money. He's one of many public officials who left-wing, so-called progressive elected officials who benefited from Soros' money. So they get no jail time. They pleaded guilty to some misdemeanor charges. And originally, this is just for one of the men. It's kind of hard to see, but look at all the felony charges. This is just for one of them. They had very similar felony charges originally: aggravated assault, conspiracy, ethnic intimidation, robbery, terroristic threats. In the end, all the felony charges were dropped, and there were only the misdemeanor cases in the end, and just a few. And I'm going to pull it up just so you see. This is from Antifa Watch. Please follow them on Twitter if you don't already. So this is their post about it. They actually pulled up the what they pled guilty to. Yeah. So James Alcoff pled guilty to disorderly conduct. There's no punishment he gets there. No sentencing at all. Nothing. Not even probation. Nothing. Thomas Massey pled guilty to simple assault. He'll just get a year of probation. No jail time. Thomas Keenan pled guilty to simple assault and possession of instrument of crime. 2 years probation. Yeah. So there does appear to be this sort of two-tier system of justice in America. If you are in a left-wing jurisdiction and you carry out left-wing violent extremism, you have a pretty good chance of being let go, or even when you engage in very serious, violent crimes, the most you get is a slap on the wrist, as we've seen here. One of the men, Joseph Alcoff, he had been investigated by the Daily Caller a few years ago, by the way, before he engaged in violence in that Antifa attack. This is from late 2018, Daily Caller. It's really good. Please read it. It was written by Andrew Kerr. So they found out Joseph Alcoff, he was one of the Antifa members who was convicted in the 28th assault case. He ran a account. So he's based in DC. He comes from a wealthy, well-to-do background, from a very established family. He ran a Twitter account under a moniker, and Daily Caller found out it was him. And he had all these posts calling for revolution, calling for the killing of political opponents. And he did a lot of campaigning. He worked in DC and did campaigning in the Democrat Party, essentially. And he posted about his work in doing research for Antifa and his involvement with Antifa. This is a violent and dangerous man. And he's met Maxine Waters. So just take a look at this report on Daily Caller. And of course, in this video here from the Daily Caller, this is he's second from the right. That's Joseph Alcoff. But then next to him, the person on the right, all the way on the right, that is the author of the Antifa Handbook, by the way. And Antifa Handbook was a book that was endorsed by the Attorney General in Minnesota. I'm blanking on his name. Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison endorsed that book and said that it would strike fear into the heart of Donald Trump. Now, that book, if you buy it and you read the beginning, the introduction, it says that proceeds in the book will go to support the Antifa International Defense Fund. So here we go. Yeah. Joseph Alcoff's on the left and Mark Bray on the right. So yeah, Mark Bray actually has links with violent extremist Antifa members. Here's a photo of Joseph Alcoff in the middle, meeting with Maxine Waters. So yeah, the Democrat Party needs a clean house, but of course, I don't think they view this violent extremism within their ranks as an issue. Actually, they probably view it as something they sort of secretly welcome because they have an unofficial paramilitary to carry out violence against their political opponents. For those who are just joining, who joined late, again, leave questions and comments, please, throughout this. Speaking of Antifa violence and left-wing violence and the lack of prosecution, I have some more updates to my tracking of the attacks on pregnancy resource centers by far-left extreme Antifa-linked pro-abortion groups and individuals. So Jane's Revenge, the group that have claimed now numerous attacks across the country on pregnancy resource centers. They released a manifesto / statement a number of weeks ago after the firebombing of the pro-life office in Wisconsin, and they've released a new statement. In their old statement, they said you have 30 days to meet our demands. If you don't, our patience will run out. I mean, classic domestic terrorist demands in the way it's written. It's very chilling. Look it up and read it. It's on my locals. It's on some news sites. I've tweeted about it as well. So they released a new statement this week, and I'm just going to go over some highlights. So yeah, again, this is called communication. They released it on an Antifa blog. I'll just highlight some things from here because it's quite long. You have seen that we are real and that we are not merely pushing empty words. They name all the cities that they carried out attacks in. So Madison, Wisconsin, Fort Collins, Colorado, Olympia, Washington, blah, 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 Washington, D.C., Asheville, North Carolina, Buffalo, New York, Hollywood, Florida, Vancouver, Washington, Portland, Oregon, Gresham, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon. And then they say, we will work in countless locations invisibly. You read the communiques from various cells. See, so they admitted from the very beginning that they operate as a terrorist group with cells in different parts of the United States. Further on in the statement, they wrote, your 30 days expired yesterday. We offered an honorable way out. You could have walked away. Now the leash is off. We have demonstrated in the past month how easy and fun it is to attack. Further down. Rest assured that we will, and those measures may not come in the form of something so easily cleaned up as fire and graffiti. It's open season, and we know where your operations are. Through attacking, we find joy. Yeah, so far-left terrorism operating openly in America. Nobody's been held accountable so far. We know there's lots of individuals involved. I'm going to pull up a video of one of the attacks, one of the pregnancy resource centers video footage. It was of this one. So I talked about this last week briefly. So this is in Hollywood, Florida. This attack was on May 28th. So they wrote, whenever they attack, they leave all these graffiti that makes it so you know who's responsible. And the ideology, they wrote abortion bans are fascist, Jane's Revenge, that's the name of the group. If abortions aren't safe, neither are you, the anarchist A symbol. So this is a video of them, surveillance video. The angle that it's at, you're not able to see the attack that happens, but you see them walking in. And so, they come prepared, they're masked up, they're dressed in dark clothing. Nobody has been arrested in relation to any of these attacks, by the way. And I think it's a scandal that we are not having discussions in the mainstream about the dangerous direction that we're moving in. The fact that cells are being activated to carry out violence, and they have carried out violence, and they're promising an escalation. They've carried out fire bombings, by the way. So in Portland, there's been, just in the Portland area alone, there's been, I believe, 3 attacks. So that's more than other places. This one's really severe. So this is in the Portland suburb of Gresham, which is just directly east of Portland. So there was a alleged firebombing, or I should say suspected firebombing attack on the 11th. The group, the office's first image. This is being investigated by the local police, the FBI, and ATF. Yeah, you can see they completely destroyed it. I mean, imagine if people were inside here, or were trapped inside. You could kill a lot of people. And, that's the point of these terrorist attacks, is to make those who work in these centers, which are linked usually to religious organizations, Christian organizations, it's to make them fear for their life and safety. And that's very clear when you read the statements, by the way, from James Revenge. Unfortunately, there's been more attacks, not just Gresham. So this one here in Minneapolis, this was just June 15th. So this was just yesterday. The windows were smashed out of a pregnancy resource center in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is really radical, by the way. Investigators need to be paying attention to the violent extremism that's happening there with the far left. Abortion is liberation. So I don't call these groups pro-choice, because they're not. They're pro-abortion. They believe that abortion is great. And actually, if you probe some of them, if you have a chance to, they're even pro-infanticide, really. They follow a nihilistic worldview in a way. And they hate Christianity, because one of the tenets of Christianity is that every life has value and worth, and grace and forgiveness is central and core to the religion. And these far left militants have no grace or forgiveness in their heart. In fact, they believe that if you merely express the wrong political opinion, that you are worthy of death. And if you die, they'll relish and celebrate in your death, and they hope that your death is painful. Another attack as well. This is in Anchorage, Alaska. This happened earlier in the month, but I only just heard about it recently. So this is on June 2nd. So a glass was smashed out. They wrote, "We will not go back." And then they put nails all over the parking lot in the cracks. I think what would be really powerful and important is if Planned Parenthoods across the United States issued statements condemning the violence against these centers. Likewise, if Planned Parenthood or places that provide abortion were subjected to political attacks and threats, that pro-life groups would speak out as well. It's really dangerous for our democracy and stability for violent extremists to feel empowered to carry out violence against their political opponents. And unfortunately, the precedent has been set that if you're on the far left, you can do a lot of it with impunity. Okay, I'm going to start reading the questions and comments. Please send them in right now, some more. Some of you already have. Drink some water. As you can see, I'm traveling. I probably look pretty tired. I am. Thanks all of you for joining me every week. We are on episode 12 now. You believe that? 3 months weekly of an episode. So this is from username Andy1. He or she is asking why is this happening? And this was in reference to really sexually explicit behavior in front of children at Pride events. As I said earlier, this open sexuality that's on display at Pride events is not new. I think what does appear to be new for me, and I don't recall this happening until very recently, but the push to brand these events as family friendly, that is new. And trying to bring children to these events or explicitly host events that are around these themes and acts for children or families, that is new. Why is it happening? I think this is a controversial view, but the radical trans ideology in queer ideology is in a way really in opposition to gay and lesbian identity, because gay and lesbian identity, it's about once upon a time you were born this way and this is how you are and you can't change it, which is actually a really, I think, powerful argument when gay rights activists were trying to explain why they needed access to the same institutions and protections as heterosexual couples and people. And they elevated it to the same level as sex. By sex, I'm referring to male, female, and race. But radical trans and queer ideology is about you can identify however you want, and that gender identity and sexuality is fluid. And so that's why at one moment you can be he, him, then you can be she, her, then you can be they, them, then you can be it, its, and then you can be ze, zer, and you can cycle through that. And when you embrace that ideology, then it's explicitly like a political ideology where people need to be introduced to this way of thinking. So as this part of radical queer and trans ideology has become more mainstream, I think there's a more concerted effort now to influence explicitly through brainwashing younger generations. That's not a politically correct view, it's my view. And I find it really disturbing because it's a violation of the innocence of children. This is also from Andy One. He's asked lots of good questions. He's asking, is the Weather Underground still running the show? And by show, I think he's referring to like far left violent extremism in America, or is Antifa the new generation? The Weather Underground were completely defeated. So for those who don't know, the Weather Underground were a communist terrorist group that were active in the 60s and 70s in the US. They carried out a number of bombings, kidnappings, jailbreaks, robberies. They killed people. They tried to kill cops. They did kill cops. Chester Boudin, the recalled district attorney in San Francisco, his parents were members of that group, and they were convicted because they were involved in killing 3 people. And then he was raised by Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, who were also members of the group, by the way. So the FBI, if you go back to the 70s and you look at like FBI's most wanted, many of them were on the top 10 because they were involved in so many bombings and attempted bombings. And because at that time, these were formal groups with membership and they were small. So it was easy for the FBI to break apart those cells in the group and to arrest, prosecute, and sentence each one. And the violent extremists of the far left today, if you read the statement that was put out by James Revenge, the tactic has changed now in that it's changed in the way that it's like how the Islamic State is. You can be an actual member, like if you're part of Rose City Antifa, you have to apply and be vetted and go to meetings. But you can also be a member in the sense that you just pledge to the ideology in your mind and you carry out your own actions in the same way. that many jihadist attacks that happened in America and in Western Europe and in the UK by Muslim extremists were those who never made it to Iraq or Syria. But they watched the videos of IS, they read the content, they engaged with them online, and then pledged their loyalty to ideology and carried out their own autonomous direct action. I'm using the language of Antifa because it's really the same. So it is an entirely different game, and I think our law enforcement, they will have a very, very hard time to break this up if they're even committed to doing that. And I think there's question in a lot of our minds of local and federal law enforcement's commitment to dealing with far less violent extremism. This comment is from Radioactive. This comment is from the Markets Man. This person wrote, sex is a private and sensitive thing. It is not to be advertised, gay or straight. I agree with that. I think there's a reason that our societies have laws against explicit sexual porn being shown in a way that anybody can just see it, including minors. We view that as harmful to children in particular, and also a violation of people of the right to not be subjected to that type of explicit content. I think with the radical left in pride-related events, they are trying to explicitly make people uncomfortable, but make people uncomfortable in only like one direction, I should say, because Islamic societies have extremely conservative views on sex and the role of men and women. They have some of the most rigid outlinings for how you should live and what is prohibited and prescribed. I think of any social structure. And in Western European countries where certain areas in their countries will have large Muslim migrant communities, there's no effort to bring this type of bride stuff into those communities. In fact, if you do, you'll be called by the left as Islamophobic. So, let's see. Whew, we're at 7:59. Okay, that means I'm just going to talk a bit about where people can follow up with my work. Just one moment, please. I have a link tree. My name on there is slash Mr. It's slash Andy NGO. So it's linktree slash Andy Ngo. And here you can see links to my website, links to my GitHub, and places where you can support me on Locals and Patreon, Subscribestar. You can donate on PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo. Cash App and Venmo, I have. You can give one-time donations. My username there is at Mr. Andy Ngo. It's the same username I have on GitHub. I think by now you all know that this line of work, independent journalism, is not particularly it's not lucrative or anything, which is why for us involved in it, we constantly have to bring up the fact that please like and share and support our work, because your donations are how this stuff is able to continue. And I'm really lucky. I say this every time. I'm very lucky to be able to do this full time, and I need your continued support so that I can continue doing it. But the outpouring support that I have, people who tune in, who share my reports, who send me messages of support. Some people, all they're able to afford is a few dollars. I don't take any of that for granted, by the way. There are a lot of other things that people can be spending money on, especially right now with all the costs coming up. I'm in the US right now, and I'm just shocked at how expensive things are. Things are also expensive in other countries as well, but just anecdotally, I can really feel it in a different way here, particularly when you're looking at the gasoline prices. And so, for all of you here who are impacted by that, I'm really sorry. And, in spite of that, if you're able to still support me, it means a lot. Well, thank you so much for joining me on episode 12 of Weekly Notice. Yeah, really appreciate it. Catch me next week on the show, 7 p.m. Eastern time. All right. Thank you, everyone. Leave more comments in the getter in the comment section, please. Bye.